thought while you were here, it would be great to get this opportunity to chat about sort of mental health with you, because you're someone that I was sort of quite inspired by before I started this podcast around mental health. And I think also something, one of the things that I think about mental health, I possibly use the term in a different way to other people, because I see it part of this very holistic ecosystem of like, it's not like one thing, it's connected to so many sort of different things in our lives. This idea of mental health, which I think is often sort of medicalized or separated out into something else, but I think it's part of a bigger whole. And I mean, one of the ideas that I was really drawn to that you talk a lot about is that the idea of sort of separation. And I was wondering if you could sort of elaborate on sort of, or have ideas on how that sort of the separation relates to sort of our sort of mental health in society. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it just seems like such a broad question that it'll invite me to make a very theoretical answer.
Well, how do you think we can tap it down into something less theoretical?
Yeah, so I'd say that for one thing, what is mental health?
Yeah.
Really, health means wholeness. And I think that might be a good entry point, because then we can ask, what is a whole human being? And I think a whole human being is someone with a full complement of relationships, from distant relationships to very intimate relationships. Most human beings who have lived on this planet had very intimate relationships with the people around them and the natural world around them. I remember reading, I think it must have been from David Abram, one of his books, but this account of traveling with an indigenous person on the land, and every single feature, every boulder, every hill, every stream had a story. It was woven into a tapestry of meaning that went back for many generations. So that's a kind of an intimacy, and to know what every plant is used for and the stories around that plant, and to know the habits of every animal and the way that that animal relates with human beings. So that's a kind of intimacy, a kind of relationship. And then also to know the people around you deeply, to know the people who grow your food and make your things, and to have these multidimensional relationships. Okay, so that would be a whole human being. And you can see how in modern society we have none of that. I realized I'm staying at my brother's farm for the summer. We go there in the summer, and so many beautiful bird songs, and I realized if I hear the bird song, there's probably not more than 5 or at most 10 birds where I can actually picture the bird. Most people would have been able to do that with hundreds of birds. So this whole world of nature, even I'm on a farm, I'm on land, but even so, it's alien to me. So I feel a bit alone. I don't have that sense of belonging in the world. And the same thing for social relationships. You go to the store, do you know that person? Maybe you do a little bit if you go to the same store every day, but you don't know them nearly as well as you did your neighbor in a peasant village in England in 1300. In that situation, you were intimate with so many people. So we have none of that, and I think that is a lack of wholeness, therefore a lack of health, that comes out as all kinds of anxiety and insecurity and neurosis. And then we're given a pill to cure it, or therapy, psychotherapy. There you are in a room with somebody. And maybe that actually does provide a little bit of intimacy. Someone gets to know your story really well, but it's not really what you need. So you could say that mental illness is built into society as we know it. And therefore, to heal mental illness or to foster mental health is fundamentally a social, political, economic problem. It's not just how do we treat people better.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. I mean, one of the reasons I started doing this whole thing was because it was from my own sort of lived experience of depression and anxiety, that sort of thing. And I found that like my experience was very much that: go to the doctors, sort of GP, their sort of medicine or talking therapy, both of which I think they have a place, but like there's more to it. And I think, but I mean, I understand like that from the medical services are so overstretched. I mean, in the UK and in lots of other countries, so they can't do that. So I sort of wanted to explore more around what is the alternative thing. And I think I came across through listening to many different stories that it seems to be this big sort of spiritual crisis of sort of being lost and being churned out of a system and then not really knowing what to do with that.
Right. Yeah. Like when you say, these things have their place, talking about, I'm not sure if you're talking about psychiatric medication or talk therapy and stuff. If you take for granted the conditions that cause us to be miserable and insecure and anxious, if you take all that for granted as unchangeable, then you do need these things to keep society running. But a more revolutionary question is, do we need to take these things for granted? How can we change them collectively? And then there's also, how can I change them even just in my own life? Like, how can I create conditions where I feel more of a sense of belonging and stuff? And to some extent, that's impossible without changing the entire society. But to a large extent, it is possible to foster more intimate connection with people and nature. Like, there are things that we can do that have been shown, like even like garden therapy, like get people in the garden and a lot of the mental illness goes away. Get them into nature, get them into participation in some social project. And of course, if you're feeling really depressed, you probably don't even want to do that. So something has to intervene to bring you from that universe of despair and depression into a universe of participation and connection. And I think that a good first step for a sane mental health system would be to intervene by changing conditions rather than by giving pills that allow conditions to be maintained.
Yeah, I would agree with that entirely. I think another thing that I see, like a lot of the language, especially around sort of this idea of mental health, is about sort of combating, getting over, sort of, it's very sort of conflict-based language, I think. And something I think I'm becoming more aware of through my experiences and talking to others is that maybe it's not like a question of learning how to avoid all these things, but it's learning how to sort of lean into the experience and how to actually navigate that, rather than see it as a problem, really. Mm-hmm. Like if you have depression, maybe it's a symptom of sort of the environment you're in, and how do you learn to listen to that and be with it, rather than like I medicate it and hope it goes away, because I don't know if that's simple. But then like this, for me, like the question around sort of like rites of passage and like eldership always seems to spring up there. There's not really like in I think in Western society, I don't feel there's really that sort of support system, and especially for young people when they're growing up, to have that. And like, I don't know, do you have any sort of ideas around that or sort of thoughts on that?
Most of the support structures are there to help you become a functioning member of society as it is. And if society as it is needs to change, and your purpose in this world is to help serve that change, then the support structures will not be your friend. And we need alternative support structures that understand that society has got an illness, and to adjust you to that is to make you ill too. And in that viewpoint, depression could be a symptom of health. It could be a symptom of the soul's rebellion because depression is a kind of a withdrawal from life, you know, and you just want to stay in your room and not do anything. You don't want to participate. So non-participation is a good thing. I mean, suppose, you know, we're in Nazi Germany and, you know, you got a job at the death camp, you know, and then you start feeling depressed, you know, it's like, man, I just don't want to go to work, you know. And then the psychiatrist comes and says, oh, the reason you don't want to go to work is that you're depressed. And here's some medicine to make you once again happy to go to work. Like, actually, your depression was healthy. And not that we live in such an extreme situation, but in a way, like, the normal functioning of society is bringing incredible suffering to humans and other beings. So I think that it is kind of healthy to not want to participate in the life that's offered to us. So I think that any approach to mental health that doesn't recognize that doesn't acknowledge that non-participation could be a good thing, and that sees health as being well adapted to the way things are, that's got a problem.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably what my view as well, is that actually it just seems sometimes that the sanest thing to come out of this world is like it's being depressed. It's like that's probably the wrong way of saying it, but like, yeah, sort of this thing they sort of class of sort of insanity is actually like a reflection of sanity in a world that is sort of not very conducive all the time to humans really being sort of able to flourish. And I think it's a really interesting area to explore.
Yeah. But so I do think we need kind of mentors and helpers to nourish that part of ourselves that says, yeah, actually the world is kind of insane. And I'm not crazy for thinking so. And then what can I do about it? Like, what am I called to do about it? To listen to that call requires courage. And in my experience, it requires help. It requires people to share what they've heard, like what call they've heard. And you're like, yeah, I've heard that too. And maybe this person has been on this path for a long time and is familiar with some of the territory and the setbacks and the challenges, and then that person is qualified to mentor you also in living a life outside of the normal prescription, helping you be strong when you can't be strong yourself. So a mentor can do that, and a community can do that too. And I think it's really important. Like, I don't think we can be truly sane and effective without other people around us who are holding that field.
I see that a lot with when I'm talking to people. There's definitely this idea of sort of the way that people think they should be living, because that's all the signals around them are telling them that, but the way that they feel deep down they want to live, or they need to be living, and they're in conflict. And I think that resonates with what you said there, because like there's that idea of, without those sort of people that share your ideas or your understanding, or at least sort of recognize how you're experiencing the world, it's very hard to reconcile your inner feelings with a world that tells you that's not what you should be doing.
Right, and then add on to that economic difficulty, because often then when people listen to the call of their purpose in the world, it may not be something that is highly paid. In fact, it probably is something that won't get them a job at all, or often is something that isn't going to make money in the normal economy. And so I think we need to have people with financial legacy, inheritors, or people who have made a lot of money and have a change of heart. We need them to essentially fund the artists and the change makers and the revolutionaries. I'm not talking about violent revolution here, but the people who are agents of change. They need to be supported, not just with moral support, but also with financial support. Like, so people with money need to really take on creating social enterprises and projects that give meaningful work to people who want to serve this change. Yeah.
Yeah, I see that. I mean,
yeah, it's not just about changing your attitude. Like the financial
yeah,
problems that people face when they have a transformation are real and not universal. I'm not saying like you have a transformation and you'll never make money again. I mean, there are like people already funding beautiful, beautiful things in the world, and there are people willing to pay for things that inspire them. And like there is like, so I don't want to paint too bleak a picture, but there has to be a willingness among people to offer like real, tangible economic support in addition to mentorship and community and encouragement.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I understand that. I make a podcast about mental health, and it's not a particularly lucrative business, but
so I hope that you have like some way for people to donate.
I do. I have a Patreon and stuff like that. But I think also that's so interesting. This actually, we were talking earlier this morning with some people about this idea of, sort of the capitalist system and mental health in general, and this sort of, I guess, there's this pressure to like always be doing more and to grow and to be doing something big and achieve more with your life, and it's not okay to be where you are. You have to be sort of constantly striving, and I think that puts a lot of pressure on everyone, and especially on individuals, and especially on sort of sensitive individuals. So
right, yeah, it's a whole setup where you get social acceptance for living a certain life and showing certain results, and we're trained so that social acceptance becomes part of our self-acceptance. So if you're not achieving success as it has been defined for you, then there's that voice that's like, I'm a failure, my life is a waste, I'm not good enough. That's a psychological pressure that torments people. Even if like another part of them knows that, I'm doing the right thing. This is important. Even though I'm not making a lot of money, even though I'm not looking like a success, I know this is important. But then there's that other voice saying, no, you're not. You're wasting your time. Your father was much more successful. You don't even have life insurance. You don't even have investments. You're totally There's a conflict, and that I think is definitely a source of anxiety, and it's this psychic drain that prevents us from being fully healthy. It's just like this programming that most of us carry.
Yeah, I think you just tapped into the two voices inside my head.
Uh-huh.
I'm sure they're in everyone's head. It's a real sort of
look at you. You've got how old are you? 35, 40, right? And all you have is this podcast. What have you done in your life? Where's your degree? Like, look at so-and-so. They're, the chief counsel for this corporation, and this one's working in the government, and you haven't achieved anything, right? There's that voice that
there's that voice, but that voice is one I'm getting better at sort of like, I don't know, not repressing, just like listening to it and putting it to the side and being like, that actually, that's like probably by all the metrics that I would have used to base success on, or that maybe society does base success on, I'm pretty much like a failure in that sense. But I know right now that I feel more in tune and more aligned to what I want to be doing or need to be doing, or just, I don't even know what it is. I feel that I'm doing what I need to be doing right now, and I'm happy for that to change when it needs to change. But but it's very, very difficult to change those metrics that especially I'm 32, so I've had all these like years and years of sort of programming into one way of thinking, and that was very sort of rational, science-based. I mean, just like, I think that's pretty much just a typical result of the education system I went through and the sites I went through, and it's like, I think it's a big process of unlearning and unlearning and unlearning, and then sort of trying to sort of build back from a more open foundation, really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and hopefully you can pass your unlearning down to the next generation.
Yeah.
If you ever have a family, or even when you interact with young people, maybe they won't have to do as much deprogramming, and they'll be able to start. Like, I feel like that's kind of true with my kids. You know, I spent many years deprogramming from the cultural programs that had been instilled inside of me about what a successful, worthy life looks like. And finally, after I did enough unlearning and enough deprogramming, I was able to turn toward what I'm here to do. So I feel like my kids are maybe able to start at a much younger age, and not have to go through those years and decades of self-struggle.
How do you do that with the...
Well, for one thing, avoiding sending them to normal schools. And if they do end up in a normal school, then to make sure that I don't become the ally of the school that wants to attach their self-esteem to their academic performance. And I remember one interaction I had with Matthew's school where he wasn't doing his homework. And they're basically, the teacher called me and they're basically like, you know, you're going to have to make sure he does his homework. Like, asking me to pressure him to do that. Now, how do you pressure a child? Usually it's through the giving and withholding of approval. And associating that, and the way you signal approval is with punishments and stuff. And so basically wanting me to become an ally in programming him to do the program, to seek the rewards that the system gives him, to reinforce the association of good school performance with being a good person. Like that's so if you can avoid doing that with young people and instead validate their reluctance. Like, I was like, yeah, I wouldn't do that homework either. What a waste of time. Like, what are you really interested in? You know, that. So then, you know, then he doesn't have that baggage when he grows up.
I think that sounds amazing. It's a very important thing to do.
Yeah, whereas my parents, like, bless their hearts, but
Yeah.
they really thought that I would be in trouble in life. I wouldn't have a good life if I didn't do my homework and get good grades. And they were, you know, they gave me a lot of pressure to do that. And I ended up torturing myself a lot because I didn't want to do the work and I would procrastinate and what's wrong with me? And I would have this inner struggle to fight myself in order to be worthy and worthy of approval, worthy of good things in life. I had to fight myself. So I think that inner struggle is part of what we call mental illness. Like, that generates so much internal tension that something breaks in some people.
So what was the change for you that helped you move past that? Or are you not past that?
In a lot of ways, I'm now past that. I mean, gosh, I'm 50 now, you know, so I mean, I hope I would have gotten over some of it by now, and some of it still comes up. But I think part of it was my growing understanding of the deep wrongness in the way that the world is right now. Just understanding the way that the world system functions. And part of it was direct experience that showed me that the reality and that the explanation of the world that I'd been given was wrong, was way, way too narrow and limited, through kind of spiritual experiences, psychedelic experiences, things like that. These shook me loose from the reality story that I had been indoctrinated with. Yeah, and also maybe encountering people who lived in a different way. People who, like, I deeply admired who didn't buy in. to that system of rewards, who didn't care about success in that way. And also seeing that the people who did achieve that success weren't really happy. Didn't do them any good in the end. Didn't stop them from, having divorce, from having depression, from being addicted. The rewards looked empty. And that's a crisis for a lot of people. The emptiness of the rewards of success is revealed to you, but there's no replacement. So there's a period of being lost. And that's when the best medicine is something that gives you a view of another kind of success or another kind of well-being. Someone can come in and model it, or you can have a spiritual experience or something that like the old story has to begin to break down, I think, before the light from outside that story can pierce through.
I think yesterday you said something about, I'll get it wrong, but like when you're lost, you're being directed by, already being directed by the seeds of the future or something along those lines. You see, I've got it written down actually, probably. I don't know where I wrote it down, so it doesn't matter. But yeah. Right,
like we get glimpses by grace of what life could be and who we could be in that life. And those then provide some guidance. Because once you have that experience, then the old reality seems all the more intolerable. Because you've seen something else. Like no one can tell you that, oh, this is all there is.
But there's not often words or the vocabulary to explain that. Maybe you don't need to explain it. Maybe that's going full circle back to the support networks of people that actually you don't need to explain that because they already know.
Yeah, especially the first encounter, like you're like, yes, here it is. What is it? God, really can't say, but it just feels like a strong invitation into who I will be. And those are such precious experiences. And yeah, if you've had one of those experiences, or anyone who might be listening to our conversation, even to bring that experience into presence, to like call it up, to remember how you felt at that moment, and just to do honor to that experience, that will exercise an effect too. Like that was real. What you saw could have been something you saw through another person who demonstrated some kind of courage or generosity or kindness or power that called to you. Yeah. Or just an experience you had that was outside the normal bounds of what you thought was real, and that called you into a new being. And maybe you didn't listen to that call, or you couldn't, or you weren't ready. Maybe that call is something that persists over years and comes again and again in different forms. So it's not like you're a failure if you didn't immediately totally transform your life. That's not the requirement. But what is helpful is to recognize the preciousness of that and to accept the gift of it, and to as I said, to do it honor. So yeah, I mean, I would even like ask us right now to take a minute to bring to mind one of those people or experiences, and just to do it honor, just to like, yeah, that happened. That person exists.
Well, shall should we do that? And then I think I'm aware we've been talking before this for a long time as well, so we could sort of, maybe it'd be a nice place to end with that. Just a moment to reflect on.
Let's do a moment, and then ask me one more thing.
Oh, that's pressure. Yeah, we'll do. Okay, let's do a moment. Okay, here's one more thing. I guess it'd maybe be useful for just for the sort of people listening, because I think there's often people that are sort of quite sort of in this what they describe as like a dark place, and I don't know if do you have any sort of, I don't know, I think advice is the wrong word because it's so, but just like what are like the small steps that people can take when they are in that wilderness.
Yeah. So obviously, anybody who's in that place, who's listening to this, is already listening to this. So I'm actually not going to offer small steps. You probably already know the small steps, but for some reason you can't take them. You're not taking them, or you're not ready to take them. And I would ask you to consider that the pace of your transition out of the dark state has its own intelligence. And that when the moment comes to take these steps, you will be ready and you will do them. That if you've withdrawn into a cave, that maybe there's a deep wisdom operating there, that you've gone through a process. And the very fact that you're listening to this right now means that that process is at a transition point. So it's not about what can you do to get out of this. It's about recognizing that this time of darkness is reaching its end. And you can feel grateful for that. And you can feel the ring of truth in my words. That this isn't something that is up to you to do. It's an initiation that's happened to you. It's a process that has taken you through itself. And a change is coming. And you can trust. It's not that it just happens without your participation. It's that you come into a new willingness to participate. You come into a readiness and a responsiveness. And this isn't something either that you have to make yourself do. Instead, I would ask you to give a little bit of attention right now to the feeling of readiness that is growing in you, and to offer it some trust and say, thank you, readiness, because you are going to push me with a feeling of excitement and rightness at the moment when the time to take these small steps comes. And I will recognize that moment, and I will trust my feeling of readiness, my desire to participate in this life, that perhaps I've withdrawn into darkness as a necessity to transition out of a wrong life. And I thank my soul for guiding me to do this. So this is a kind of an invitation into self-trust that, again, is not something that you have to accomplish. I hope this isn't too complicated. It's something that you can feel. It's already there, like a deep knowing, a deep trust through all of the darkness. Like there's some little speck of knowledge that I'm not a fuck up, that I am whole, that I am wise, that who am I? I am life. I am life, taken the form that life takes in the circumstances that I was put into. I am just as much life as that tree over there, or the tree that is growing up all twisted and gnarled because it was in rocky soil and in shadow and against a cliff or whatever. And it knew what to do. It knew how to grow in that rocky soil. And maybe I was in rocky soil too. And I am life. I know how to grow just as much as any other living being. And so I guess just what I'm asking right now is to touch that knowledge and accept that that's all you need to do. Touch that knowledge and it begins to work you. Even if you don't believe it. Even if you think that you won't take those steps. There's that knowledge that you will. That you are life.
Great. Thank you very much. Thanks, Charles. That was
You're
great.
welcome.